The Secret in the Vineyard. Part 1. The Estate of Shadows. The Château de Saint-Jean, nestled amidst the rolling hills of Burgundy, was a sight to behold. A grand estate sprawling over acres of vineyards that had been in the Delacroix family for generations. The château itself, a stately building of weathered stone and ivy-clad walls, looked as though it had been plucked from the pages of history. For centuries, it had been the crown jewel of the Delacroix family's wine empire, renowned for producing some of the finest vintages in the world. But the grandeur of the estate could not mask the shadows that had begun to creep over it in recent years. The death of Louis Delacroix, the reclusive patriarch of the family, shocked the quiet village of Saint-Jean-sur-Vigne. It wasn't just because Louis had passed, but because of how it happened. Found in the early hours of the morning by his longtime housekeeper, his body lay in his private study, a room that few had ever been allowed to enter. The housekeeper had discovered him slumped over his desk, his face pale and still, with an empty wine glass lying shattered beside him. A pool of deep red wine, mixed with something far darker, seeped into the rich Persian rug beneath him. The local authorities quickly ruled it a heart attack, dismissing the scene as nothing more than a natural death. After all, Louis Delacroix had been in his 60s, and though still vigorous for his age, it wasn't entirely surprising for a man with his stressful lifestyle. But something about the scene didn't sit right with Claire Rousseau, a young investigative journalist who had arrived at the chateau just days before. Claire had come to Burgundy to write a feature on the region's famous vineyards and their upcoming wine harvest. The assignment had been straightforward. She was to spend a week at the Château de Saint-Jean, interviewing its workers and writing about its renowned wines. But from the moment she set foot on the estate, something about the place had unsettled her. The atmosphere in the chateau was heavy, almost oppressive, despite the beauty of the surroundings. The workers moved about with a sense of quiet efficiency, avoiding conversation whenever possible. And then there was Louis Delacroix himself, whom Claire had only briefly met before his untimely death. He had been polite but distant, his pale blue eyes assessing her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. There was something about the way he carried himself, something dark, like a man burdened with secrets too heavy to bear. It wasn't until the day Louis died that Claire realized just how deep those secrets ran. On the morning of his death, Claire had been scheduled to interview Louis in his study about the history of the vineyard. She had been excited, eager to ask him questions not only about the wine but also about the Delacroix family's storied past. But when she arrived at the estate that morning, the gates were locked and police cars were parked in the gravel courtyard. Louis Delacroix was dead, and her interview was never to happen. Claire's instincts as a journalist kicked in immediately. There was something off about the way the housekeeper, an elderly woman named Marie, had described finding the body. According to Marie, Louis had been healthy the night before, drinking a glass of his prized vintage in celebration of a new business deal. But when Claire questioned the workers at the estate, they seemed reluctant to talk about what had happened. It didn't take long for Claire to learn that Louis Delacroix was not as beloved as his reputation suggested. There were rumors of bitter feuds with his employees, business partners who had suddenly disappeared from the picture, and whispers of a troubled marriage before his wife's mysterious death years earlier. But the most unsettling rumor of all was about a woman named Elodie, a woman who had once worked at the vineyard, only to vanish without a trace. No one knew much about Elodie, except that she had been young, beautiful, and somehow tied to the Delacroix family in ways no one dared to discuss. Some said she had been Louis's mistress, others claimed she had been involved in a business scandal. But one thing was certain, her name had been erased from the official history of the chateau, and her disappearance had been quietly swept under the rug. Determined to uncover the truth, Claire began digging into the Delacroix family's past. The deeper she went, the more she realized that Louis Delacroix's death was not as simple as it seemed. There was something haunting the vineyard, a shadow that stretched back decades, and it all seemed to center around the mysterious Elodie. One evening, as Claire wandered the estate in search of answers, she found herself drawn to Louis Delacroix's study. The room had been sealed off since his death, but through the window, she could see the flickering light of the chandelier still casting eerie shadows across the room. The air was thick with the scent of old wood, wine, and something else, something metallic, like blood. Standing outside the locked door, Claire felt a chill run down her spine. What secrets had Louis Delacroix taken with him to the grave? And how far would someone go to keep those secrets buried? She knew one thing for sure. The Vineyard was a place where stories were told in whispers, and not all of them had happy endings. To be continued. If you like the story, then don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for the next part. Stay tuned.